Well, that didn't take long, Max. We're back to talk now about a wine that I fell in love with a couple of years ago. You don't forget his face.
Yeah.
He is a unique figure in the wine industry. So I'm excited to talk to you about Raul Perez. We're drinking the Altria Saint Jacques, the Bersco 2020. We're still up in that northern western side of Spain, not too far from Rio Spacious, but it's actually further than it looks, right? It's like is that about an hour and a half, 2 hours?
Yeah, you're looking at probably at least an hour and a half driving plus, like comfortably. He would do the drive a little bit faster than that. You might not be surprised to hear. But yeah, so Raul's home turf of Bierzo, Bierzo, it is not technically in Galicia, but it's right on the border with Galicia. So it's if I don't know if you can see in that circled area right there, the kind of the green border line that's running through there, that's the border of Galicia to the west and Castilla y León to the east. So technically, like in the political map sense, Bierzo lies in Castilla y León.
And is he from there as well?
Yeah, so he was born in 1972 in a village called Valtuye de Abajo in Bierzo with, fewer than 100 souls living in it. And, he says that he was the last person to be born in the village, like before women started going like to hospital in the bigger nearby town to give birth.
Well, the stories lean into vine material, old vines, incredible soils, hillsides, and um, what are we looking at here in that photo? That beautiful.
Yeah, so the vineyards of his village really are amazing. And so that bottom photo, like you mentioned, we're talking hillsides, and these are like gently sloping hills, moderate elevation. So his home village, at least where most of his wine comes from, we're talking about a gently rolling, undulating landscape, not unlike in Burgundy or something where you're talking about a moderate elevation, gentle slopes, with often good vineyards located kind of mid slope, for example. But the really certainly the most important thing about his village's vines is, and you can see it from the photo right away, is the age of the vines on average. So Bierzo in general as an appellation, but Raul's village of Valtuye in particular is a particularly good example of this. Extremely high average vine age. Like the vast majority of the entire vineyard area of his village was planted between the 1890s and the 1940s, which is incredible.
Now, the grape Mentia, is it known by another name?
The most in Spain, like it is, but Mencia is by far and away the most important name in Spain. The most important synonym for it, I would say, is actually the name it goes under in Portugal, where it is called Jaen, which is Jaen. Um, and it is definitely a really interesting variety, and I often say that it's quite likely the most interesting and highest quality emerging red grape variety in Spain, probably, in my opinion. And it's now, I would say that the Mencia grape is nowadays, it's still not a household name, and it's got a long way to go before it is really like enshrined in the pantheon of grape varieties. But like certainly it's much better known than it was 15 years ago, thanks to the work of people like Raul.
Because of the efforts of winemakers like Raul, where they're bringing in wines that are getting critical attention, and therefore we got to kind of go back and fill in the gaps. What is this, and what do we compare it to, and how do we teach people about this variety? It's. I think the timing of it is great because we see interest in grapes like Grenache and Pinot Noir, and I think it's kind of some trapped kind of right between those two, and I think that it really does serve that population very well. And so if you like either of those varieties or even maybe Beaujolais, that it kind of, has a lot in common with those that type of expression.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that this is a finesse style of Spanish red wine, period, full stop. If we're talking about analogs to better known varieties, particularly French, I might even go so far as to suggest a Rhone Valley analog, and in a couple different ways. I mean that in the sense that so in Bierzo here, it's in the far northwest, the north of Spain. It's quite a bit cooler than a lot of growing areas in Spain, and that's a large part of why they're able to achieve these quite finessed red wines. But depending on the prevailing weather of a given year, they are inland enough. They're not right on the coast. They're far enough inland that depending on whether it's a hotter or a cooler year, they will talk about it being more Atlantic or more Mediterranean, depending. So it's really right on the bead. Like you can get different expressions depending on the year. And because the Mencia grape, both in the vineyard and the winery, but then also in the glass, does also present, in my view, some Syrah-like analogs as well, like a kind of violety aroma sometimes and a little bit of meatiness, kind of nice purpley red kind of color. Because of that, I often say like you could compare it to either northern or southern Rhone Syrah, depending on whether the vintage is warmer or cooler and like the style of the given producer you're talking. And so I often find that to be a helpful analog. Or I even have what one of my best customers for this wine has called it sort of this specific wine, the Ultrea Saint Jacques. He's referred to it as like a sort of hypothetical hybrid between Northern Rhone Syrah and a Cru Beaujolais, which you already mentioned, Ian. So yeah, he's definitely some have called him a driving winemaker. There's this concept of the flying winemaker, which is like just consultant who's, jetting around from France to South America to Australia to wherever. Here, this is actually a photo of what I was just talking about of a more, way up there in the mountains at 800, 900, or even 1,000 meters above sea level, where he actually has vineyard that high, the highest altitude vineyards in the entire appellation. But they're only just now in the process of coaxing them back to high quality production and kind of restoring the damage that was done by a lot of the vineyards being abandoned since the Spanish Civil War, really. I mean, but the few of them are still kicking around up there.
Well, the wine that we're tasting today received very nice marks from Robert Parker's Wine Advocate, um, and kind of gets into a little bit of the wine uh, production. Why does it talk about Allion? Oh, that's because the tanks did come from Allion. You
Yeah, it's you
story
know,
there.
so to talk about the specific wine that we're tasting, the name, by the way, Ultrea Saint Jacques, which is a little bit of a mouthful. Uh, I don't know if any of you are familiar with, or perhaps you have done the Camino de Santiago, if that term is familiar to anyone. It's the way of Saint James. It's a ancient Catholic pilgrimage route through Western Europe, whose endpoint is Santiago de Compostela, which is a city in the far northwest of Galicia, where the remains of Saint James are supposed to be. And so in the medieval period, this was one of the most important pilgrimages you could do as a Catholic. Like you could basically go to Jerusalem, Rome, Canterbury, or Santiago. Like it was that important.
And so, Max, thank you for helping us get there. And every little steps, baby steps. Thanks
Yeah,
for
my pleasure. And thank you all for supporting, real wines made by real wine growers, from people like Raul, who really they're among the very best of, we could call this like the quote unquote new Spain. Raul is at the center of the new Spain, changing the conversation.